Welcome back to Appalachian Genealogy, Stories from the Mountains, where we uncover the people, cultures, and legacies that shape this incredible region. I'm your host, Misty Hamilton Smith. In our last episode, we dug into the history of German pioneers and their influence on Appalachian culture. Today, we're turning our attention to another group whose story is just as fascinating, the Scotch-Irish settlers. These hardworking, fiercely independent people traveled thousands of miles, from the rugged landscapes of Scotland to the rolling hills of Ireland, and eventually to the Appalachian Mountains. Along the way, they carried with them music, traditions, faith, and values that became deeply rooted in mountain life. If your family has been in Appalachia for generations, there is a good chance you have Scotch-Irish heritage somewhere in your family tree. So settle in as we step back in time and follow their journey, the hardships, the migrations, and the lasting mark they left on our mountain culture. To understand the Scotch-Irish migration into Appalachia, we first need to go back to the early 1600s. After years of conflict between England and Ireland, King James I of England launched the Plantation of Ulster, a policy that brought Scottish Presbyterians to Northern Ireland to settle lands confiscated from the Irish. These settlers were lowland Scots, known for their hard-working, resourceful lifestyles and deep Presbyterian faith. They lived in Ulster for about a century, farming rocky soil, building small villages, and maintaining close-knit communities. But life in Ulster wasn't easy. Over time, tensions grew between these Scottish settlers, the native Irish population, and the English crown. Economic struggles, rising rents, and religious discrimination put enormous pressure on the Scotch-Irish families living there. By the early 1700s, thousands of them began to look westward across the Atlantic for a better life. They became part of the largest wave of immigration to colonial America. Many arrived first in Pennsylvania, where William Penn's promise of religious freedom attracted diverse groups of settlers. But it wasn't long before those rugged Scots found themselves on the move again, seeking open land and independence. That path would lead them straight into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. After landing in Pennsylvania, the Scotch-Irish quickly discovered that the fertile lands around Philadelphia were already taken. Rather than settle in crowded towns, they followed what became known as the Great Wagon Road, a migration route stretching from Pennsylvania through the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and into the Carolinas. Traveling this road wasn't easy. Families packed everything they owned into wagons or carried it on horseback. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, and faced constant threat of disease, wild animals, and conflict with both Native American tribes and other settlers. By the mid 1700s, large numbers of Scotch-Irish families were establishing homesteads in the Shenandoah Valley. Others pushed farther south into North Carolina, Tennessee, and eventually the rugged ridges of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia. Unlike some immigrant groups who clustered in villages, the Scotch-Irish tended to spread out, settling in small family farms tucked into hollers and along creeks. Their independence was legendary, and many distrusted colonial authorities and taxes, traits that would later influence Appalachia's reputation for self reliance and resistance to outside control. It's no coincidence that the Scotch-Irish played major roles in westward expansion and even in conflicts like the Regulator Movement in North Carolina, where they resisted unfair taxation in the 1760s. Their journey along the Great Wagon Road didn't just populate the mountains, it helped shape the independent spirit of Appalachia is still known for today. For the Scotch-Irish, faith and family were the foundation of life. Most were Presbyterians, though their strict Calvinist roots softened over time as they adapted to life on the frontier. Churches weren't just spaces, they were community centers, schools, and gathering places. Sundays often meant walking miles through the mountains to attend worship, where neighbors exchanged news, traded goods, and strengthened community bonds. Many Scotch Irish congregations later gave rise to the revivalist movements like the Second Great Awakening, which swept through Appalachia in the early 1800s. They also brought rich cultural traditions that blended into Appalachian life. Their music, in particular, had a lasting influence. The fiddle tunes, ballads, and reels they carried from Scotland and Ireland became the backbone of Appalachian folk music and later bluegrass. When you hear High Lonesome Ballad in the mountains today, you're hearing echoes of Scotch-Irish heritage. Their foodways, too, shaped the mountain table. Simple, hearty dishes like potato soups, oatcakes, cornbread, and stews reflected their resourcefulness and adaptation to the Appalachian environment. Over time, these recipes merged with German, English, and Native American influences, creating the unique culinary traditions we still enjoy today. From church hymns to banjo tunes, from storytelling to family reunions, the Scotch Irish wove their identity in the very fabric of Appalachian culture. Today, historians estimate that over 3 million Scotch Irish descendants live in the United States, and many of them trace their roots directly back to the Appalachian Mountains. If your family has been here for generations, there's a good chance these pioneers are part of your story. When tracing your Scotch Irish ancestry, start by looking for Presbyterian church records in early mountain settlements, land grants and deeds along the Great Wagon Road, migration patterns connecting Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas, DNA matches pointing to Ulster origins. Understanding this migration not only connects us to the past, but helps us to see how deeply intertwined Appalachian history is with larger global movements. The Scotch-Irish weren't just settlers, they were storytellers, musicians, fighters, and farmers whose contributions continue to echo in our traditions, our dialects, and even in the place names scattered across the mountains. As we wrap up today's episode, we've walked in the footsteps of the Scotch-Irish, from the hills of Scotland to the fields of Ulster, from Pennsylvania's crossroads to the hidden hollers of Appalachia. They brought their resilience, music, faith, and fierce independence to the mountains, shaping the culture we know today. Their story is one of endurance, adaptation,